Well, my name is Dawn, and I am a licensed mental health counselor for over 20 years now. And as Sandra was kind of alluding to before, I had no idea 6 years ago that this would be where I am today. But my son is, I have three children, a 15-year-old son, a 12-year-old daughter, and my youngest son, Caden, is 6, and he has hypoplastic left heart syndrome. So that kind of changed my whole trajectory. I was already in grad school pursuing my PhD, and it switched my whole dissertation focus and to really get much needed information out there about what mothers go through when they're first been told of their child's CHD. So I think there's a lot of research that has not been done, and especially not from the perspective of a mom who's been there. So not only do I know kind of the counseling and the professional side of things, but I understand it as a mom. And I think a lot of times things get lost in translation between when you go online and you read about, oh, what should I do? And you get like these nice little hokey-pokey kind of like, this is the best way, and it doesn't really translate into real life. So kind of as Sandra talked about before, I think it's time to really get real about what it is we're feeling and dealing with. In general, I like to look at the CHD diagnosis as equivalent to loss. There are some of you in here who unfortunately have actually physically lost your child due to this disease. If you haven't lost your child, just getting this diagnosis represents the loss of the perfect child, that imagined child in your mind that you thought you were having, that you're no longer having anymore. And then there's the actual loss of the quality of life, if your child has certain restrictions put on them. So on some level, we feel loss from this diagnosis. And one of the ways that we cope with this loss, that they've kind of put, like, this again becomes more of the scripted kind of theory, is a grief cycle. But I think that this is something that most of us as parents, once we get this diagnosis and find this out, we go through these stages. Definitely if we lose our child. But it's important to recognize that there's no right way to feel. And the more moms I speak to and I talk to them about their experiences, they're like, wow, I thought I was the only one who felt this way. And just to normalize this experience and realize that what you're feeling is valid and it's real, and there's no right or wrong way to be feeling when you're dealing with loss, and that these are steps, but it's not a linear progression. You go back and forth. Some people never make it all the way through. That's what this is. It's a roller coaster journey, as I'm sure many of you all know. So loss, I love this when I found this, that to look at loss as you get this diagnosis, and now you're completely rocked. Your life's completely not what you're expecting. So this is the way back, how you reorient yourself back to the world as you now know it. So most people start off with a shock and denial when they first find out about this diagnosis. They deny it. I know for me, I didn't want to read anything. I was like, just find me prognosis rates, find me this, find me that, find me a surgeon, and I'm done. I don't want to know anything else. You don't want to know. You hide from the facts. You deny it. You say, this can't possibly be true. This happens to other people. It doesn't happen to me. And these are all coping mechanisms that you deal with to deal with that initial overwhelm of emotions that this loss brings to you. Once you the reality sets in and you start to realize that, okay, I can't deny this any longer, this is actually happening, it usually leads to feelings of anger. And a lot of us don't want to admit that, but you're angry. It's not fair. You're not ready for stuff like this. And that pain can be directed to your friends, to your family, to the doctors, to the actual diagnosis. And this is a part that I think a lot of us don't want to talk about, but you feel angry at your child. You know it's not your child's fault, but they're causing you this pain also. So, and I'm sorry if I'm getting emotional about that, but it's a true feeling. And then you start to feel guilty about being angry, and you just go back and forth, and the anger builds. So then this is when, you're like, okay, I got to do something about this. So this is when the bargaining comes in. And we all have been there. Come on, God, please just make his heart better. If you do this, I'll be the best parent. I will make sure he goes to everything. This kind of sense to try to regain control by bargaining. And then guilt kind of sets in because it's a way to, again, try to regain a sense of control. At least by feeling guilty, you have control over something. I'm controlling my guilt. It's my fault. That's the reason why this happened. If I had only gotten a second opinion, if I would have seen a doctor quicker. So the guilt gives you a sense of control again because at least now it's not this problem over there. It's caused by you. But again, that's not a healthy way of handling the situation, but it's what we all go through at some point. When everything sets in and you realize that this is what it's going to be, I can't bargain my way out of this. You've kind of realized this. You realize the guilt's not going to make it go away. Most of us do fall into some sort of depression. It can be just a reaction specifically to the loss, a sadness and a regret that we feel for our child, what they may miss, what our family may be missing because we're not paying attention to them. And it's also a way that you need to process your own struggle with what's happening, with your own ideas of reality. And this is a stage that can last a very long time, a stage many parents may not even get out of. The goal is to eventually get to acceptance. And when I talk to parents about this, they're like, whoa, I'm never going to be okay with my kids. I'm not. And acceptance is not about saying, yeah, this is what I want. This is cool, yeah. It's not defeat, and it's not betrayal. It's realizing that this is what is, and you're not angry or sad, but you just simply accept it because what other choice do you have? Not everybody reaches this stage. And again, I think the part that keeps you back is that understanding that accepting is not the same as defeat. That there is a difference between accepting what is unavoidable and surrendering what you could have fought more for. And this is something that no matter how hard you fight, it's not going to change anything. So, so acceptance is about using the lessons we've learned in life to come to terms with the realities of the world in our own terms and how we can make sense of this all, however that can be. So, we talked a little bit before about post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is a very real disorder, a mental health condition that is diagnosable. But I hear a lot of moms use this all the time, I'm so PTSD. And it's important to realize that there are certain diagnostic criteria for this. And for example, a few months ago, our daughter broke her foot playing soccer. And we were in one of those little urgent care centers, and it was kind of set up like a hospital with the curtains and the little TVs, and I was getting a little anxious. And then when they brought her in for the X-ray, and I had to stand behind the wall, like the flashbacks, and the smell of the hospital room, or the X-ray smell. If you've all ever been in an X-ray room, you know that smell, and it just brought me right back to my son. It wasn't my daughter anymore with her broken foot. We were back, in the operating room with my son. And that was a true experience, a true flashback of you and such. But it's not PTSD. And that's important because you need to recognize that if you are suffering from PTSD, it's something you need to get medical help in order to move forward. In the new DSM-5, it's actually grouped under its own category of trauma and stressor-related disorders as opposed to anxiety disorders. Symptoms typically start within the first 3 months, but a lot of people don't get diagnosed because they don't reach the full spectrum of symptoms. Or some do, it just takes longer. We'll go into a little bit more, but there's basically 4 clusters of symptoms. And in order to be diagnosed, you have to have symptoms from each of these clusters. Then they have to be, I think I have it here. There you go. It has to be in response to a traumatic event, which a life-threatening condition in your child would consider. The symptoms have to be present for at least 1 month. So having that one flashback or having a flashback on your child's, heart surgery anniversary, that's not PTSD. The symptoms have to cause significant distress and impairment in your life, in your social life, in your occupational life, and other areas of functioning. So if you're going about your day and you're not sensing that, then it's not debilitating. And the symptoms have to be not due to substance abuse or other medical conditions. So in the middle, you see those are like the 4 types of clusters that need to be involved, have to be there for PTSD to be there. And the symptoms greatly vary from person to person, as you'll see that there's so many different things that fall under each one. And I'm going to kind of just go through them quickly because I'd rather move on to the next part, which is really how do we move forward. But it's important that you recognize this within yourself, because if you don't get the right help you need, then it's very difficult to move forward. So again, these symptoms all have to be, every symptom we're going to talk about on the next few slides have to be present for a full month in order to be diagnosed. Under your intrusion symptoms, you need at least to have one of these. Most people have more, but just to read down the list, either a recurrent and involuntary distressing memory of the event, distressing dreams, flashbacks, or an intense psychological or physiological reaction to cues that remind you about the event. So if you see a doctor walk by in a white coat or a surgeon and you completely, your heart starts racing and you can't think and your head's spinning, that would be an example of a reaction to a cue. For persistent avoidance symptoms, persistently is a big word that they like to use under this category, and persistently means always or almost always. So for at least 1 month, you either always or almost always have to be deliberately avoiding thinking, feeling, or talking about your traumatic event, or deliberately trying to avoid external reminders, people's, places, situations. Drive out of your way to not go past that hospital all the time, or almost all the time. Then you move into your negative cognition, which is a fancy word for emotion, and mood symptoms. Again, persistent, being defined as always or almost always, and you have 2 of these. The inability to remember important aspects about the event, like you can't remember anything about, your kid's surgery. Exaggerated negative beliefs about yourself or the world. Erroneous thoughts about the causes of the event that leads you to blame yourself or other people. A persistent negative emotional state, such as fear, anger, guilt. And again, that's always or almost always. A diminished interest in participation in significant activities. Feeling detached from people and isolated. And the inability to experience positive emotions. Happiness, satisfaction, loving feelings, and again, that's always or almost always. And finally, you've got arousal and reactivity symptoms, and 2 or more of these must also be present. That's irritable behavior, angry outbursts, verbal, physical aggression towards people without being provoked, reckless or self-destructive behavior, a hypervigilance, which is like a heightened sensitivity to potential threats. So you're constantly checking around, looking around the corner. Exaggerated startle responses, being very jumpy, problems with concentration. And again, this is not just having a little bit of trouble concentrating. This is impairing your life concentration. And sleep disturbance, difficulty falling or staying asleep, or restless sleep. So to move forward, you really need to be honest and ask yourself, do I have PTSD? Because I'm all over Facebook and all the moms groups. I hear so many moms, I'm so PTSD. Are you PTSD? That's the symptoms. If so, it's important to get help, as I've mentioned. But if you're not, don't use it as a crutch. Don't use it as a way to not move forward. Use it as an excuse. I can't be happy, I have PTSD. Anyone who truly suffers from a mental disorder would not wish it on anybody. So if you don't really suffer from PTSD, be very thankful for that, and don't let it hold you back. There's actually a myth that so many people fall into, thinking that feelings dictate your behavior. So I'm so upset today, I'm just not in the mood to do anything. And that's really not the case. What we've learned in the world of psychology is that behavior actually influences your thinking, and your thinking then influences your feelings. So you are in more control than you realize. So a lot of times, that's why they tell you, just smile. Because when you smile, the actual action of smiling and using those muscles in your cheeks releases endorphins in your brain. So just walking the walk, smiling, even if you don't feel happy, even if you're not feeling okay, just doing it and putting yourself through that and getting up and getting dressed and just going about your day and thinking positively. Eventually, your brain will catch on because you're not giving it any other cues, and you'll start to feel better. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen probably in a week, but you'll gradually start to feel better if you walk the walk and think the thoughts. And at first it'll feel very unnatural, and you're not going to feel like it's real, and okay, I'll go and do this. But one day you're going to wake up and you're just going to I'm going to get up and go to the gym, and it's not going to feel like you're forcing yourself to do it. So you are ultimately in control, and you do have a choice. And this is when we're going to get real. Because again, I'm on social media, and I interact. I don't know how many of you moms out there I've interacted with or not, but you have a choice. And it's really, you have one or the other, and there's really not much in between. You can allow this diagnosis, this loss, to define you and your child. You can adopt what we call a victim mentality, and your negative thoughts will rob you of your everyday pleasures. Or you have the choice to redefine the loss. And this is the biggest, most valuable lesson I have ever learned in my training, and I've used in my life towards so many different things, but especially towards this. You cannot control what happens medically to your child. That is completely out of your control. We went through that with the grief cycle. You can bargain, you can do this. It's not going to change anything. But what you can control is how you react to that CHD and how you allow it to affect your life. So, this is again, when we get real with a victim mentality. This is when you allow yourself to be at the mercy of your circumstances. You giving away your power. You're basically saying, here you are, hypoplastic left heart syndrome. You have all my power because you are now my life. And you use it as a crutch. And a lot of moms do that. Oh, I really can't do this because, my child has this, and it's out of my control, and you start to use it as an excuse. And without even realizing it, you become angry and resentful, which goes back again to that grief cycle stage, and that's what keeps a lot of moms in that angry category. But you can be this way, but it's not going to change anything, and the CHD isn't going anywhere. And it leads to two very vicious cycles. And since I'm running out of time, I'll go through these kind of quickly. But one, it allows the CHD to define you. And you start off feeling helpless about your situation. This influences how you treat your child. And then this helplessness extends beyond the CHD to other areas in your life. And your child picks up on this. And then your child starts to feel like a victim too. And then it's a continuous cycle that's very hard to get out of. Um, and you have to realize that you're modeling this for your child. And the worst of it all is that you basically allow the CHD to take over. That it defines your child and your life. And you'll notice you'll start to become controlling to try to overcompensate for your lack of control. You get frustrated and extra sensitive and easily irritated. I mean, we all know these moms who are sitting there on Facebook who are talking about being so angry that such and such is, Johnny's mom brought him to a party with a runny nose when my kid is there, and you're spending the whole time at the party like obsessing over how could she bring Johnny when she knew that my kid was going to be there, and because of his heart, and now he's going to be sick, and before you know it, the party's over. You haven't socialized, you haven't done anything, you haven't been with your kid. You get home, then you spend another half an hour on Facebook ranting about it, trying to get everybody around you to support you and make you validate this feeling, and there's another half an hour that went by that you could have been reading a book or watching TV or playing with your child. So you get this sense of entitlement that the world should be responding to you. The world should understand. Damn it, I have a kid with a CHD, and you all should understand. You should know how to talk to me. You should know, that my kid can't do this. No, the world doesn't. And the truth is, before any of us were in this position, we would have been that mom who made those comments. And you have to realize that. You have to realize that we are in the minority, and you can't expect people to always understand. And you can't get that rage when Shaun White decides to support St. Jude's and not the CHD community. Because when you're doing that, your focus is on your CHD. You're not focusing on your life. You're allowing anything that has to do with the CHD to control you. And then you try to, and you impose limits on yourself and on your kids. So the teacher, your doctor might say it's flu season, so just be a little aware, and you take that as, okay, I'm not leaving my house for a month. And then, I feel so sorry for me because I can never leave my house. And it's a whole cycle that keeps going, and you have the choice to break the cycle. And how you do that is how you choose to respond. It's about the empowerment that Sandra was talking about before. Understanding that diagnosis is still there. It's always going to be there, but it is not the main focus of your life, and it is not going to define you or your child. When you do this, you start to feel more grateful. She talked about gratefulness and more appreciative. By not focusing on negative stuff, it allows you to focus on positive stuff and to express that gratitude. You take more risks. We've taken our son, we've traveled the world with our son already. We're going to Alaska with him next month. Because when you feel more in control, you feel more confident. And when you're more confident, your child starts to feel more confident. So you're empowering your child. And that's, you want them to feel that way. You don't want them to feel like a victim. You want them to feel like if I want to jump out of a plane, if my doctor says I can do it, then I'm going to do it. Not tiptoe around them and no. When you do that, children respond. The what ifs are easier to accept when you're feeling empowered. You realize that you're never going to have all the answers. And this is not a fake happiness. Like a lot of parents think, they're just faking it. They're not really happy. Who can possibly be happy about this? It's how you're shifting your feelings and your focus. And instead of focusing on what you don't have, you're focusing on having an appreciation for what you do have. This is what God has put in front of you. This is what you're grateful for, and you're focusing on that. Not focusing on who Shaun White is donating money to, and who, this one's mother sent this one to school this way, and trying to get the Facebook people around you because your mother-in-law came over to your house with her friend who asked stupid questions. And when you're sitting in that mentality, you're not appreciating the moment with your child. And that doesn't mean there won't be bad days. We all know that. I mean, anniversaries, doctor's appointments. I know when my son's card comes to his cardiology appointment, it's like a week of me freaking out, and that's okay too. It's okay that you'll be jealous when you see other kids doing stuff your kid may not be able to do. And it's okay to be angry, and to kind of feel like, when's the other shoe going to drop? But you want those days to be more the exception and not the norm. So you have to give yourself permission to feel that way, because it's okay to feel that way and it's real to feel that way. Your goal is to not allow that to define your daily interactions, and to realize that those negative feelings are kind of part of it, but that's not where you're going to put your attention. And by doing that, you are empowered, and you retake your power back away from this loss, and that's how you move forward. And really, those are your two choices. You either choose to be a victim, or you choose to react differently. There's really not much room in between. So, hopefully that gives you some things to think about. And now I will turn things over to one of my mentors.